you are a wedding industry professional and you have employees or contractors, and you also have an obligation to make sure that your events are safe from COVID outbreaks. But can you require that your contractors or your employees get vaccinated in order to make events safe? In today's video, we're going to be talking about just that. Stick around. Hey out there, welcome back to Wedding Industry Law. My name is Rob. I'm an attorney, and in today's video, it's all about, can we require contractors and employees of ours to get vaccinated? We do have a little bit more information on this based on a United States District Court in Texas ruling on this very matter. But this is one of those issues, employment law, where I'm going to bring in some big guns because I need help deciphering what we can say or not say to our employees. And that big gun, so to speak, is attorney Manori de Silva. Manori de Silva has international legal experience and focuses her practice on counseling businesses and executives in a variety of employment and commercial matters. Her passion is acting as a counselor to her clients, and she works closely with them to provide pragmatic solutions and develop long-term relationships. Prior to attending law school, Ms. De Silva studied sound engineering and worked as a recording engineer, as well as writing music and editing radio and television commercials for large businesses in the Netherlands. Perhaps I should have her come on the show and tell me how to get rid of background noise. But at any rate, Manori, welcome to the show.
Hey Rob, great to see you, and thanks for letting me be on the show. Appreciate it.
Hey, you're welcome. You're one of the brave and the bold to come onto the Wedding Industry Law video, YouTube, podcast. I don't know what I'm branding it as, but whatever, the show. Okay. So this is the question of the day, Manori, and I'm so glad that you're here. We'll just cut right to the chase. And that is, what are the rules? What are the laws regarding whether or not a wedding industry professional that employs people can require those people to get vaccinated for COVID?
So indeed, Rob, this is a real hot topic because there have been a lot of developments recently as well, and there's just been lawsuits. And in fact, the other day there was a lawsuit in Texas. A federal judge ruled on whether or not a hospital could require its employees to get vaccinated. So in that particular case, the judge said, yes, the hospital can have a mandatory vaccination system. And so those folks that didn't like it were basically told, if you don't like it, then your choice is really to go and work elsewhere. So broadly speaking, now there are a few loopholes, but broadly speaking, at this point in time, there's no federal law that says you're not allowed to require vaccination. We don't have a law that says to an employee, yeah, I can definitely sue my employer immediately if they tell me I have to be vaccinated. So that's the 40,000 foot line, but there are exceptions.
Okay, so before we hop into some exceptions, I just wanted to kind of parse out a little bit of this. So you mentioned federal law and the United States District Court that's in Texas. Can you kind of parse out what that means for our viewer in terms of, are there federal laws that we're talking about versus state laws which we might not be talking about, and what does that have to do with federal law? And I guess to piggyback on that, how does that have to do with? I heard of that case a lot, the EEOC. So can you? There's a lot in there, and so just do the best you can, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So the EEOC is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and it was set up by the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So it enforces certain federal discrimination laws, broadly speaking. So things like the Americans with Disability Act, and also the Civil Rights Act itself, which I think a lot of people will have heard of. And it's the big law that is supposed to protect against discrimination based on things like your gender or your race, and now your sexual orientation in certain cases. So that's what the EEOC does. It has the power to carry out its own investigations. And if an employee wants to make a complaint, they can file a complaint with the EEOC and ask the EEOC to investigate. So that's what its role is. It's really to enforce discrimination laws, but it's a federal agency. So what that means is wherever you are in the United States, there might be some kind of local law or a state law, but also in the context of discrimination. And so when we look at the discrimination and what I talked about, federal law, and you mentioned that the case that I was talking about was in a district court in Texas, what does that all have to do with each other? It's basically because right now what we know is some of the reasons that an employee can say, I legitimately can refuse a vaccine, stems from the notion of a discrimination against that employee. And it comes from two aspects of that: religious discrimination and a medical condition. So if an employee has a medical reason not to get the vaccine, or has, for example, a sincerely held religious belief which prevents them from taking the vaccine, those would be genuine reasons why an employee can refuse to be vaccinated. And so if you're the employer in that situation and you have an employee that says, I don't want to be vaccinated because of my religious beliefs, or I have a medical condition, that's a red light to an employer that stop. You can't force that employee to go get vaccinated. You should just go and get legal advice from your lawyer to guide you through how you interact with that employee. And so those are the two main discrimination angles that tie in with the vaccine.
That makes a lot of sense. So I guess at the end of the day, there were at least some of these employees at this hospital in Texas that said, I don't want the vaccine. I don't want the vaccine because of a religious reason, or I don't want the vaccine because of I have some type of medical condition or chronic illness that would allow me to have some type of standing for disability and protection for disability discrimination laws. And the Texas court said what? That those are proper exceptions. However, there are no other exceptions, or probably not other exceptions for discrimination. Can you kind of walk us through that? Because you mentioned exceptions a minute ago, and I'm assuming that those are two exceptions.
Those are pretty much the most obvious exceptions. So when I say those are the exceptions, the judge in the case focused mainly on concerns about safety that had been raised. And at this point in time, basically the judge said your remedy as an employee is to go find another employer. Just go find another job if you don't like it, because what you're saying, there were about 117 plaintiffs in that class action. So I have to confess, I don't know what everybody said, but the judge's approach was generally what you're telling me is the reason isn't falling into one of the categories that they feel were appropriate. So, or justified allowing the employees to continue working there. Now, the employees basically said, if you terminate us, we believe that's wrongful termination. But the judge said, well, no, not in this circumstance, based on what you're saying is the reason for not being vaccinated. Now, I do have to say, in that particular case, the plaintiffs have indicated that they will be appealing. So it's not the end of the story, and it's very possible that there will be other lawsuits in other states. So technically, it could possibly go to the Supreme Court. And it's also important to focus on the fact that in this case, it was a hospital. And for really obvious reasons, hospitals have a lot of sick people that they are treating. So it is much easier to justify having a vaccine mandate in an environment like that. And it's not, there are many employers that have hesitated to, throw down the gauntlet and say to the employees, it's either the vaccine or you leave. Many employers have tried a more soft approach because they just don't want the public relations aspect of this to be in social media. So that's another alternative.
Right. So I guess at the end of the day, then a wedding venue operator or a wedding DJ that employs several DJs that's operating in Minnesota or California or even Texas, right now it seems like if we were to shake the 8 ball, it would seem that if, and this is a big if, and everybody out there listening, Manori is not giving you legal advice, nor am I. So if you have any questions about this, you need to talk to a local attorney. But the big if is if all these situations and the wedding venue operator in these different states, the DJ, whatever the case is in these different states, first, the big if is it at-will employment? Because that's a big deal, right? Because typically at-will employment means that I can fire you for a good reason, a bad reason, or no reason at all, as long as I'm not violating some type of discriminatory federal legislation, which is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So if they want to make that move, the wedding professional still has to understand that there might be state laws at play that are, anti-vaccine friendly, maybe, I guess, for a lack of a better word, that would possibly prevent you from firing that person. Is that about right?
That's about right. You kind of need to check the jurisdiction in which you're operating. But, there's also a difference between, yes, I can do this because currently there's no law prohibiting it, and understanding that somebody might file and see how they get, how far they get with the lawsuit. So if you don't want the hassle of the lawsuit, you do still have to think at the front end, do I want to take a hard line on this or not?
And that's actually, and this is one of those instances in which being a business owner, particularly in the wedding space, can be difficult because on one hand, you have to operate in a reasonably prudent manner to prevent the outbreak of COVID at an event. Okay. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have, well, does part of that reasonably prudent behavior mean I've got to mandate that everybody in my office gets vaccinated? And if that's the case, then I've got to worry about whether or not they're going to sue me because I'm making them get vaccinated. Yeah. So we're in it's a perilous time in terms of COVID and running a wedding business. So Manori, you are awesome. I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us about this. I think that we have a better understanding that we don't have an understanding in terms of concrete understanding of this situation, but we really appreciate you coming on and talking about the current state of required vaccinations with employment.
You're welcome. You're welcome. If you have any other questions, my advice to you is before you implement a policy, check with an attorney.
Always great advice. Manori, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, as we have said many times in these videos over at Wedding Industry Law, when it comes to COVID and operating your wedding business, the law seems to always be fluid. But as it's looking right now, it looks as though you will likely be okay terminating somebody for not getting vaccinated unless they fall into some type of protected category, like some type of medical disability or religious exemption, or if your state law prohibits that, and who knows? So everything is always in motion. You know what I mean? So I know that it's hard out there. We do the best we can. I hope that you found the information in this video informative, maybe a little exciting, or I don't know, at least tolerable, I guess. But new videos every week. They come out on Monday. If you have any suggestions for content, if you want to see something covered in a future video, please be sure to let me know. As always, hit the notification bell to receive updates when new videos are come out. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. New episodes on Mondays. And with that, folks, we'll see you next time.